Admiral Sarah Martinez had spent 28 years climbing the naval hierarchy, breaking barriers that seemed impossible to shatter. Standing at 5 feet 6 inches with steel-gray eyes that could cut through pretense like a blade through silk, she commanded respect wherever she walked. The conference room at the Pentagon buzzed with conversations between high-ranking military officials, defense contractors, and government representatives. Everyone knew this meeting would determine the future of naval operations in the Pacific. The mahogany table stretched across the room, surrounded by leather chairs that had witnessed countless strategic decisions. Maps covered the walls, marked with red pins indicating areas of concern. Sarah entered quietly, her uniform crisp and decorated with ribbons that told stories of courage and dedication. She had earned every single one through blood, sweat, and unwavering determination. Colonel James Richardson dominated the conversation, his voice booming across the room as he outlined his proposed strategy for handling rising tensions in the South China Sea. Richardson was old-school military, a man who believed women belonged in support roles rather than combat positions. He had never hidden his disapproval of Sarah's rapid advancement through the ranks. "We need aggressive positioning," Richardson declared, pointing at the largest map with his laser pointer. "Show them we mean business, park our destroyers right at the edge of international waters and make our presence known. These situations require masculine leadership and decisive action." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Several officials nodded, impressed by Richardson's confident delivery. The defense contractors scribbled notes, already calculating the costs of implementing such an aggressive strategy. Sarah remained silent, studying the maps and listening carefully to every word. General Hayes, the only other woman in the room, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She had worked alongside Sarah for years and knew the Admiral possessed a strategic mind that could outmaneuver any opponent. Hayes caught Sarah's eye and raised an eyebrow, silently asking when she would speak up. Richardson continued his presentation, becoming more animated with each passing minute. "We've been too soft for too long. The enemy respects strength, not diplomacy. We need to show them what American naval power looks like." He slammed his hand on the table for emphasis, causing several coffee cups to rattle. Secretary of Defense Michael Torres sat at the head of the table, clearly impressed by Richardson's passion. Torres had been skeptical about promoting women to top military positions, though he tried to hide his bias behind politically correct language. He found himself nodding along with Richardson's aggressive approach. "Admiral Martinez," Torres said, turning his attention to Sarah for the first time since the meeting began. "You've been unusually quiet. Do you have any thoughts on Colonel Richardson's strategy?" The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward Sarah, some curious, others skeptical. Richardson smirked, confident that his presentation had won over the decision-makers. He expected Sarah to either agree with his plan or offer some weak alternative that would prove women lacked the stomach for real warfare. Sarah stood slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. She walked to the front of the room without saying a word, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable, but Sarah seemed completely at ease. She stopped in front of the largest map, studying it with the intensity of a chess master examining a complex position. Her fingers traced the shipping lanes, the territorial boundaries, and the strategic that controlled access to the Pacific. Everyone waited, the tension in the room building with each passing second. Sarah finally said, her voice quiet but carrying clearly across the room, "I appreciate Colonel Richardson's enthusiasm, but I'm afraid his strategy would lead us directly into the very conflict we're trying to avoid." Richardson's face reddened. He started to interrupt, but Sarah held up her hand, and something in her expression made him pause. "The South China Sea isn't just about showing strength," Sarah continued. "It's about understanding the delicate balance of power that keeps this region stable. Every move we make sends a message, not just to our opponents, but to our allies who depend on these shipping lanes for their economic survival." She moved to a different map, pointing to specific locations with surgical precision. "Colonel Richardson suggests parking our destroyers at the edge of international waters. What he hasn't considered is that such positioning would force merchant vessels to alter their routes, potentially disrupting billions of dollars in trade." The defense contractors stopped writing and started paying closer attention. Economic implications always commanded their respect. "Furthermore," Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. Aggressive positioning actually weakens our negotiating position. It signals desperation rather than strength. Our opponents would see it as an invitation to test our resolve through increasingly provocative actions. General Hayes leaned forward, recognizing the brilliance of Sarah's analysis. She had seen the Admiral work magic in similar situations, turning potential disasters into strategic victories through careful planning and flawless execution. "What do you propose instead?" Torres asked, his earlier skepticism beginning to waver. Sarah returned to the front of the room, facing the assembled officials directly. "We use our actual advantage," she said simply. "Intelligence and precision rather than brute force." She walked to a computer terminal and pulled up a detailed satellite image of the disputed region. "Our surveillance capabilities are unmatched. We know exactly where every vessel operates when they move and what they're carrying. We can anticipate their actions before they make them." Richardson couldn't contain himself any longer. "That's exactly the kind of passive approach that got us into this mess in the first place. We need action, not more watching and waiting." Sarah turned to face him directly, her gray eyes steady and unwavering. "Colonel Richardson, with all due respect, you're confusing action with reaction. What you're proposing is purely reactionary. We would be responding to their moves instead of forcing them to respond to ours." The room grew even quieter. Several officials exchanged glances, recognizing they were witnessing something significant. "My strategy," Sarah continued, "involves positioning our forces where they can observe and respond to any threat within minutes, while maintaining the flexibility to support our allies or protect commercial shipping as needed. We become the chess player instead of the chess piece." She clicked to another image showing submarine positions and radar coverage areas. "This positioning gives us tactical superiority without appearing aggressive. Our opponents will know we're there, but they won't be able to predict our next move because we maintain multiple options at all times." Torres found himself leaning forward, genuinely intrigued by Sarah's approach. He had expected a typical female perspective focused on diplomacy and compromise. Instead, he was hearing a strategy that combined aggressive capabilities with strategic restraint. "The beauty of this approach," Sarah explained, "is that it gives us maximum flexibility while denying our opponents the same advantage. They'll be forced to make the first move, which automatically puts them at a disadvantage in any subsequent negotiations." Richardson shook his head in frustration. "This sounds like a lot of fancy words for doing nothing. Sometimes you need to show your teeth to make people back down." Sarah smiled for the first time since entering the room, but there was no warmth in the expression. "Colonel, I've been showing my teeth in the Pacific for 15 years. The difference is, I choose when and where to reveal them for maximum effect." The tension in the room shifted. What had started as skepticism towards Sarah's presence was evolving into genuine respect for her strategic thinking. Even the defense contractors were reconsidering their initial calculations. "Can you give us a specific example?" Hayes asked, knowing Sarah had dealt with similar situations before. Sarah nodded and moved to another section of the map. 3 years ago, we faced a similar situation near the Taiwan Strait. Colonel Richardson's approach would have involved a show of force that could have escalated into actual conflict. Instead, we used positioning and timing to our advantage." She traced shipping routes with her finger as she spoke. "We identified when our opponents would be most vulnerable, then positioned our assets to exploit that vulnerability without appearing threatening. When the crisis peaked, we were able to demonstrate our capabilities without firing a single shot." "What was the result?" Torres asked. "Complete tactical victory," Sarah replied. "Our opponents backed down, our allies remained confident in our support, and commercial shipping continued without interruption. Most importantly, we avoided giving our enemies any propaganda victory they could use to justify future aggression." Richardson slumped in his chair, realizing his simple approach was being outmaneuvered by Sarah's complex understanding of modern warfare. The other officials were clearly impressed by her track record and strategic depth. Sarah continued her presentation, but the atmosphere in the room had fundamentally changed. What began as a routine strategy meeting had transformed into modern naval warfare. The Admiral moved with confidence between the maps and displays, her expertise evident in every gesture and explanation. "The key to understanding this situation," Sarah said, adjusting the satellite image to show real-time vessel movements, is recognizing that our opponents aren't just testing our military resolve. They're probing our economic vulnerabilities and alliance structures simultaneously. She highlighted several shipping lanes on the screen. Every day, approximately $40 billion worth of goods pass through these waters. Any disruption affects not just our economy, but the global supply chain that connects Asia, Europe, and the Americas. Defense contractor William, who had initially dismissed Sarah's approach as too cautious, now found himself taking detailed notes. The economic implications she outlined could affect his company's contracts for years to come. Our traditional approach, Sarah continued, has been to view each incident in isolation. We respond to specific provocations without considering the broader pattern of behavior our opponents are developing. She clicked to a timeline showing incidents over the past 2 years. Red dots marked confrontations, while blue lines showed shipping disruptions and yellow indicators highlighted alliance tensions. Notice the pattern, Sarah said, using her laser pointer to connect related events. Every major provocation coincides with important trade negotiations, alliance summits, or domestic political events. This isn't random aggression. It's coordinated strategic pressure designed to achieve specific political objectives. General Hayes nodded in recognition. You're saying they're using military posturing as a negotiating tactic. Exactly, Sarah replied. Which means our response needs to address the political objectives behind their actions, not just the military actions themselves. Secretary Torres leaned back in his chair, processing this perspective. His advisors had briefed him on individual incidents, but no one had presented such a comprehensive analysis of the strategic pattern. Richardson, still frustrated by the direction of the meeting, tried to reassert his position. This is all very interesting academically, but what happens when shots are actually fired? You can't analyze your way out of a real firefight. Sarah's expression hardened. Colonel Richardson, I've been in more real firefights than most people in this room. The difference is, I've learned that winning a battle isn't the same as achieving your strategic objectives. She moved to a classified section of the briefing materials, requiring everyone to verify their security clearances. 6 months ago, we encountered a situation that perfectly demonstrates this principle. The screen displayed a classified incident report that most attendees hadn't seen before. Sarah had personally commanded the operation, but the details had been restricted to only the highest levels of military leadership. Our opponents attempted to establish a permanent monitoring station on a disputed reef, Sarah explained. Traditional military thinking would suggest we should have prevented them from landing or forced them to leave once they arrived. She showed aerial photographs of the reef and surrounding waters. Instead, we allowed them to establish their position while secretly monitoring every aspect of their operation. We learned more about their capabilities, communication procedures, and strategic objectives in 3 weeks than we had in 3 years of normal intelligence gathering. The implications became clear as Sarah continued her explanation. When we finally chose to act, we knew exactly how they would respond to every move we made. The operation lasted 47 minutes from start to finish. They completely abandoned their equipment and haven't attempted similar operations since. Torres found himself genuinely impressed. Why wasn't this reported more widely? Because the real victory wasn't the tactical success, Sarah replied. The intelligence we gathered allowed us to anticipate and prevent 12 similar operations before they began. Our opponents still don't know how we acquired that capability. The defense contractor raised his hand. What kind of equipment made this possible? Sarah smiled knowingly. The same equipment Colonel Richardson wants to position aggressively at the edge of international waters. The difference is how we choose to use it. She returned to the strategic overview, showing how individual tactical decisions connected to broader political objectives. Every military action sends multiple messages. We need to ensure those messages support our long-term goals rather than just addressing immediate concerns. Richardson made one final attempt to defend his position. All this strategic thinking is fine, but sometimes you need to project strength to prevent conflicts from escalating. Our enemies need to know we're willing to fight. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. You're absolutely right, Colonel. Our opponents do need to understand our resolve. The question is whether we demonstrate that resolve through positioning that limits our options or through capabilities that expand them. She highlighted specific locations on the tactical map. Richardson's approach would require us to maintain aggressive positions indefinitely. That ties up our resources, creates predictable patterns our enemies can exploit, and potentially triggers the very conflicts we're trying to prevent. My alternative, Sarah continued, maintains the same deterrent effect while preserving our tactical flexibility and strategic initiative. Our opponents will know we can respond decisively to any threat, but they won't be able to predict exactly how or when we'll act. General Hayes recognized the elegance of Sarah's strategy. It's like the difference between showing someone your weapon and demonstrating your marksmanship skills. Perfect analogy, Sarah agreed. One approach might intimidate, but the other commands genuine respect. The meeting participants were beginning to understand the sophistication of Sarah's strategic thinking. What had initially seemed like excessive caution now appeared to be carefully calculated strategic superiority. Torres checked his watch and realized the meeting had run significantly longer than scheduled. Admiral Martinez, can you summarize the practical implementation of your strategy? Sarah moved to a final presentation slide showing deployment schedules and resource allocations. Phase 1 involves repositioning our existing assets to maximize coverage while minimizing visible presence. This can be accomplished within 2 weeks using current resources. She outlined the specific movements without revealing classified operational details. Phase 2 establishes enhanced intelligence gathering capabilities that will give us real-time awareness of all activities in the region. Implementation requires approximately 6 weeks. Phase 3, Sarah continued, involves coordinating with our allies to ensure unified responses to any provocations. This is actually the most challenging aspect because it requires diplomatic coordination alongside military preparation. Richardson studied the timeline, looking for weaknesses in Sarah's plan. What happens if our opponents escalate before you finish implementing these phases? We respond appropriately to the specific threat, Sarah replied. The beauty of this approach is that each phase enhances our capabilities without restricting our response options. We become more effective at every level of potential conflict. She returned to the satellite display, showing current vessel positions and movement patterns. Right now, we're reacting to our opponent's initiatives. This strategy reverses that dynamic, forcing them to react to our positioning and capabilities. Torres found himself convinced by Sarah's comprehensive approach. What do you need from us to implement this strategy? Primarily patience and trust, Sarah replied. This approach requires time to develop its full effectiveness. Political pressure for immediate visible action could undermine the entire strategy. She looked directly at each person in the room. I understand that patience isn't always politically feasible, but the alternative is a series of escalating confrontations that could lead to actual warfare. Raised another question about equipment costs and timeline feasibility. Sarah provided detailed answers that demonstrated her thorough preparation and practical understanding of implementation challenges. As the meeting drew toward its conclusion, the transformation in the room's atmosphere was remarkable. Sarah had entered as a skeptically regarded participant and emerged as the clear strategic leader. Her comprehensive analysis had exposed the limitations of conventional approaches while offering a sophisticated alternative. Richardson, despite his initial opposition, found himself grudgingly respecting Sarah's expertise. He still preferred more direct approaches, but he couldn't argue with her track record or the logical foundation of her strategy. The tension in the room reached its peak when Sarah approached the communication console at the front of the conference room. She entered her personal authorization codes and activated the secure satellite link that connected directly to Pacific Fleet Command. Every person present understood they were about to witness something unprecedented. This is Admiral Martinez requesting immediate priority communication with Captain aboard the USS Phoenix, Sarah announced into the microphone. Her voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. The seconds that followed felt like hours. Richardson shifted nervously in his seat, suddenly realizing that Sarah wasn't just presenting theoretical strategies. General Hayes sat forward, recognizing that they were about to see Sarah's approach in real-time action. Secretary Torres gripped his coffee cup, understanding that whatever happened next would influence American naval policy for years to come. The communication system crackled to life. Admiral Martinez, this is Captain. Phoenix is currently maintaining position coordinates 77 Alpha Bravo 4. All systems operational, awaiting your orders, ma'am. Sarah's transformation was immediate and striking. The analytical strategist who had been explaining complex theories suddenly became the operational commander who had earned her rank through decisive action in critical moments. Her voice dropped to a tone that carried absolute authority. Captain, implement Echo Protocol 7 immediately. Authorization code Martinez Delta 779 Alpha. Confirm receipt and understanding. The response came without hesitation. Echo Protocol 7 confirmed, Admiral. Implementation beginning now. Estimated completion in 14 minutes. All stations reporting ready status. Understood, Captain. Maintain radio silence until phase completion. Martinez out. Sarah terminated the communication and turned to face the assembled officials. The room had fallen completely silent, with everyone trying to process what they had just witnessed. The casual ease with which Sarah had issued complex operational orders demonstrated a level of practical command authority that none of Richardson's presentations could match. "What exactly did you just do?" Torres asked, his voice reflecting a mixture of concern and fascination. Sarah returned to the main display screen, which now showed updated satellite imagery of the disputed waters. "I ordered the implementation of a pre-planned operational sequence that will demonstrate the effectiveness of strategic positioning versus aggressive posturing." She highlighted specific locations on the map where American vessels had been maintaining routine patrols. "For the past 6 months, we've been conducting what appeared to be standard training exercises. In reality, we've been establishing the foundation for exactly the kind of strategic flexibility I've been describing." As she spoke, red indicators on the screen began moving in coordinated patterns. The changes were subtle but clearly purposeful, like watching a chess master execute a carefully planned combination of moves. "Our opponents have been tracking these routine patrols," Sarah explained, "developing their own response patterns based on our predictable movements. They believe they understand our operational capabilities and limitations." The display updated again, showing new positions that weren't immediately obvious but created entirely different tactical possibilities. Richardson studied the screen intently, beginning to grasp the sophistication of Sarah's preparation. "Echo Protocol 7 reverses those assumptions," Sarah continued. "In the next 10 minutes, our apparent vulnerabilities will become strategic advantages, and our opponents' prepared responses will become tactical liabilities." General Hayes recognized the brilliance of the operation. "You've been playing a longer game than anyone realized." "Exactly," Sarah confirmed. "While others focused on immediate responses to individual incidents, we've been establishing the conditions for comprehensive strategic superiority." The communication system activated again, displaying an incoming priority message from Pacific Fleet Intelligence. Sarah read the classified report quickly, then shared the relevant details with the meeting participants. "Our surveillance systems are reporting increased activity from opposition forces," Sarah announced. "They're responding to our movements exactly as our intelligence analysis predicted they would." She adjusted the display to show both American and foreign vessel positions in real time. The pattern that emerged demonstrated how Sarah's strategic positioning had effectively trapped their opponents into predictable response patterns. "Notice how their movements mirror our previous positions," Sarah pointed out. "They're moving to counter strategies we abandoned weeks ago, while our current positioning gives us multiple response options they haven't anticipated." The defense contractor found himself deeply impressed by the operational sophistication. This level of strategic planning must have required months of preparation. 18 months, Sarah confirmed. "That's how long it takes to implement genuine strategic change rather than tactical adjustments." Richardson, despite his earlier skepticism, couldn't deny the effectiveness of what he was witnessing. "How do we know this will work long-term?" Sarah smiled with the confidence of someone who had considered every possible variable. "Because we're not just implementing one strategy. We're establishing the capability to implement multiple strategies simultaneously, depending on how our opponents choose to respond." The communication system activated once more. "Admiral Martinez, this is Captain. Echo Protocol 7 implementation complete. all objectives achieved within projected parameters, requesting further instructions. Sarah's response demonstrated the careful calculation behind her every decision. Maintain current positions and monitor all frequency communications. Report any changes in opposition behavior patterns. Standard surveillance protocols remain in effect. Understood, Admiral. Phoenix maintaining position. Out. As the communication ended, the full implications of what they had witnessed began settling over the meeting participants. Sarah had demonstrated that she possessed not just strategic vision, but the operational capability to implement complex plans with precision timing. The key difference, Sarah explained to the now attentive audience, between reactive and strategic approaches is that reactive thinking addresses current problems while strategic thinking prevents future problems from developing. She returned to the overview display, showing how the morning's operations fit into broader regional stability objectives. Today's demonstration eliminates approximately 6 different potential crisis scenarios over the next 3 months. Torres found himself reconsidering his entire approach to Pacific strategy. How many other protocols like Echo 7 do you have prepared? Enough to address any realistic scenario we might encounter, Sarah replied diplomatically, clearly not intending to reveal the full extent of her operational preparation. Richardson made one final attempt to understand the scope of Sarah's planning. What happens if our opponents develop countermeasures to these protocols? Sarah's answer revealed the deepest level of her strategic thinking. Then, we implement the protocols we've designed to counter their countermeasures. The advantage of thinking 18 months ahead is that you can prepare for multiple layers of action and reaction. The meeting participants exchanged glances, recognizing they had witnessed something far beyond routine military planning. Sarah had demonstrated a level of strategic sophistication that redefined their understanding of modern naval warfare. Admiral Martinez, Torres said formally, I believe we've seen enough to make our decision. Your strategic approach is approved for full implementation. Sarah nodded acknowledgement, but showed no surprise at the decision. She had known from the moment she entered the room that her preparation and expertise would ultimately prevail over Richardson's conventional thinking. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, Sarah replied. Implementation will begin immediately, and you can expect regular progress reports through normal channels. As the meeting concluded, several participants approached Sarah privately to ask additional questions about specific aspects of her strategy. The transformation in their attitudes was complete. The woman they had initially viewed with skepticism was now recognized as the most strategically sophisticated military mind in the room. Richardson, gathering his materials, paused to speak with Sarah directly. Admiral, I may not agree with all your methods, but I have to respect your results. That was impressive. Sarah accepted the compliment graciously. Colonel Richardson, your questions today helped me explain important aspects of the strategy that might not have been clear otherwise. Opposition often strengthens good ideas. As people filed out of the conference room, General Hayes remained behind to speak privately with Sarah. That was masterfully done. You didn't just win the argument, you demonstrated why you deserved to win it. Sarah gathered her classified materials, securing them in her briefcase with practiced efficiency. The demonstration was necessary. Too many people confuse military rank with military capability. Sometimes you need to show your actual qualifications rather than just your credentials. The Pentagon corridor buzzed with conversations as word spread about the morning's meeting. Admiral Sarah Martinez had not only defended her strategic approach, but had demonstrated its real-time effectiveness in front of the most senior military and civilian leadership. Her call sign would be uttered with new respect throughout the Pacific Fleet, carrying the authority of someone who had proven her capability when it mattered most. The silence that had filled the room when she spoke would be remembered as the moment when preparation met opportunity and excellence could no longer be.